After the violence in Charlottesville, Virginia, it's been clear that there is an issue of white supremacy in the country, right-wing violence in the country, and unfortunately, it is not an issue that the Trump administration has any interest in tackling. In fact, there has been some evidence of that. Back in 2009, there was an organization known as Life After Hate that thankfully, the Obama administration funded later on in his presidency. He offered the organization $400,000 in order to help people who have been part of white nationalist movements get out of those movements safely. So the whole point is, to find people who don't want to be part of these movements anymore and then safely get them out without fear of retaliation. Now, the Trump administration has decided to defund that organization. In June, the Trump administration dropped funding for one of the few organizations devoted to countering and de-radicalizing white extremists in the United States. Reuters reported in early February that the government was looking into shifting the Counter Violent Extremism program's focus, honing in on extremism connected to Muslim groups exclusively. The administration also froze $10 million in the CVE funding. Only a few months later, Life After Hate was dropped from the program's list of funded groups.
So CVE is trying to counter all radicals, whether they're right-wingers, white nationalists, Muslims, or whatever it might be, right? So even that program, they're like, whoa, let's hold on now. Do we really want to do that? But main reason they wanted to pause is not because they wanted to not go after Muslim radicals. Of course they did, right? They wanted to weed out the programs that went after white supremacists. So Life After Hate was the only program funded under CVE that only focused on whites. There are other programs that focus on Muslims, that focus on other groups, but this program was specifically for white supremacists. It's a former neo-Nazi who founded it, who got out of the movement and wanted to help people get out of the movement. And then, unlike the previous tracking by the government, etc., they're not infiltrating anybody. They're not going into your mosque or your church. They're not going into your student groups. All this group does is, if you're looking to get out, we're gonna help you get out.
Right, okay? They offer support to people who no longer wanna be part of a hate group.
And so, since they're the ones that were exclusively about white supremacists, they're like, that's easy, your funding is gone.
Exactly.
Okay, and the founder of the group is just quoting facts and stats when he says, but wait a minute, white supremacists have done more terrorist attacks than Muslim radicals inside the United States. In fact, twice as many. So, this is gonna lead to problems, and here we are.
That's right, and look, this is just one example of the right wing going out of its way to either defund or dismantle an organization that's trying to combat non-Muslim right-wing extremism in the country, which we do have a problem with. Back in 2009, the Department of Homeland Security was bullied into dismantling a department that focused solely on right-wing extremism in the country. And we're now feeling the ramifications of that, okay?
Yeah, so let's, by the way, I mean, in case we're not clear enough about it, or in this video, because we've said it over and over in other videos, Obama didn't do the right thing either.
Right.
He, as Anna pointed out, at the very end of his administration, he finally gave this group funding, etc. But earlier in his administration, because he was intimidated by Rush frickin' Limbaugh, he also deprioritized going after radical white supremacists who might do terrorism. It was a terrible mistake, and a Republican was running that group inside the Department of Homeland Security. And ever since Obama has done that, he's come out and gone, this is a terrible mistake. There are more white supremacists in the country than Muslim radicals. There are more terrorist attacks by those guys. We should be going after those guys. Don't worry about what Rush Limbaugh says or other Republicans say. Go, and we're not targeting the right wing. We're targeting right wing radicals.
That's right.
White supremacist, racist radicals.
That's right. And just to be clear, this is not to say, we should shift all of our focus and all of our priorities on combating white supremacy. No, it means, hey, we have an issue with white supremacy. Let's also allocate some of our resources in combating that as well. And by the way, I have some stats on right-wing non-Muslim terrorism in the country. I'll get to that in just a second. But I also want to note that after Trump's election, Life After Hate reportedly saw a 20-fold increase in calls for help from those reporting signs of radicalization in themselves or others. So obviously there is a need for this organization, and again, they just lost their funding. Now, going back to the stats that I promised you, let's go to graphic 17A. So this past May, there was a report obtained by Foreign Policy and members of both agencies, the CIA and the FBI, the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security, warned that white supremacists, quote, likely will continue to pose a threat of lethal violence over the next year. Entitled White Supremacist Extremism Poses Persistent Threat of Lethal Violence, the report concludes that white supremacists were responsible for 49 homicides in 26 attacks from 2000 to 2016, more than any other domestic extremist movement.
So they also canceled a $900,000 grant for the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill to counter jihadists. Wait, why would they do that? Because it was to counter jihadists and white supremacist recruiting. Oh, even if you're going after jihadists, if you're also going after white supremacists, you're gonna lose your funding, gone. This is insanity, man. I mean, it's not just Donald Trump's press conferences, it's not just his tweets, it's not just that he has these monsters like Steve Bannon and Gorka, Sebastian Gorka, and his wife,
Catherine Gorka,
who believes insane things about how the Muslims are trying to take over the federal government. No, you know who took over the federal government? White supremacists. That's who took over the federal government. That's why you defunded anything that would fight against white supremacy. Even at the cost of going after jihadists as well.
Right.
So by the way, Sebastian Gorka, just last week on TV, one of the top advisors of the president, said there's been no attacks in America, no terrorist attacks in America that you couldn't connect to ISIS or Al Qaeda. It's just so not true that that's what we're talking about. They don't care about reality. We're trying to have a debate with guys who don't care about facts.
Right.
They just want to drive their agenda. Both the Gorkas were well known in far right circles as deeply anti-Muslim. Not anti-Muslim radicals, we're all against Muslim radicals, just anti-Muslim. And so they go out there and they go, no, I don't see any right-wing terrorism. Even though the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security says there's twice as many attacks from that group. And by the way, that's not a great thing for Muslims overall, because there's a lot less Muslims in America than there are white people or right wingers. So it's still a really bad proportion. We're not talking about that. We're talking about who's gonna kill us, who's gonna kill Americans. As a raw number, it's far more likely to be white supremacists. So put some dollars behind that so they don't kill us. It's not that complicated. But no, they care about their agenda, and their agenda is about bigotry and hatred more than they care about protecting American lives. It's grotesque. Help us build independent media together. Come join us, tytnetwork.com/join.